Probably the hottest topic right now in most IT departments is the issue of remote working. During the COVID lockdowns, people had to work from home. Now people want them back in the office. The feeling that unless people are back in the office, you're going to undermine team spirit and collaboration between people. Yet many of those staff who worked remotely believe they were equally productive remotely as at home. What then is the truth? Can we work remotely? I have the good fortune to talk to someone right now who has spent time working remotely for an organization based in Europe, who's got some perspective on the remote working perspective, challenges, and I'd like to introduce him to you. So Frank, could you tell me a bit about yourself, and then we'll go into the role that you're working on.
Sure, Peter. So my name is Frank Ruscio. I'm a CIO and COO that's worked in Australia and Europe and a couple of other places. And I've had direct personal experience myself of being the remote worker pre-COVID and during and post-COVID, as well as setting up and managing teams and businesses in those environments.
Okay, so let me go to the role you were doing for the fintech startup in Dublin. You worked there for a number of years and you decided to come back to Australia, and you believed that you could be able to do your role, which was the chief operating officer for the organization, while you're based in Sydney. Was that right?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, and so what was reality like when you were trying to do that?
Well, I'll kind of start with pre-COVID in 2017 when I got the job and I was relocating to Ireland. For the first 6 months I worked from Australia, European hours, and I thought, wow, this is going to be great. I could, do some work at the coffee shop during the day, play around a golf, and then start my day at 5 p.m. That worked for a few weeks until the nights, were getting really long for me, which was the days in Europe, and I started to kind of, pull back on the coffees and golf. But then I went to Europe, worked there. We went through remote working, which was easy because our business was set up like that, with that flexibility, without having policies in place. It was the mindset, the culture, and we hired people that could work in that environment by really, in the recruitment process, looking for those people. So when we went to remote working, it was really easy. We just didn't have the tools. We had the people, the mindset.
Can I just come in though on that?
Yeah.
When you say people were working remotely, were these people essentially in Europe, or were these people in America and Asia? And
they were everywhere. So we were setting up a blockchain fintech based business called Marco Polo Network, and we focused on global trade. So we had customers all around the world instantly from day one, and so we had offices in UK, Ireland, Singapore, the US. We had people also in those countries, as well as Spain, Germany, all over the place. So we were remote and virtual from day one. We did have physical offices in some of those countries.
Okay, so you obviously, it was obviously effective for that time, but you, when you came back to Australia, found that there were issues. Was it the role you were doing?
Yes, and also my personal experience.
Yeah.
And everyone deals with this differently. I want to acknowledge that. So what I found, as opposed to when I, in 2017, when I started from Australia working there, when I came back to Australia, COVID lockdowns were still in place, especially in Europe. This was in early 2021. But then a few months later, things started opening up. So I was, working European hours here in Australia. I knew how to kind of manage that. But then when offices started opening and we were having people back to the office, once again, we didn't have formal policies. It was just the culture that we had in the business. And when you're setting up a business and forming relationships and developing a solution for pain points that customers have, we found that most people by choice would be in the office most of the time. So when the offices opened back up, we had people going back to the office. I would be the one in a senior management position, the only one on Zoom.
Yeah.
So that was very noticeable for me when everyone else went back.
Nuances of interaction between people.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And in some cases, you can see this as kind of the lighter side of this, but in some cases, I would feel left out.
Yeah.
right? And being the only one on the laptop at the end of the table.
Yeah.
Not intentionally,
No.
but when people, especially when people went back to the office to start with, they were so, energized and excited to be back face to face, rolling up their sleeves, in these sessions, meetings, whatever they were. And as a senior manager, most of the time you're in meetings. And being the only one on the virtual platform sometimes was difficult.
Okay, so what is your perspective about the future of remote working from your own experience going forward? People want to get people back in the office. People want a hybrid working, work-life balance. Where do you see this is going to play out?
There's no doubt, and this morning in some of the sessions this morning here at the event, a lot of there's been mentions in different speakers' topics around remote working and flexibility. It's obviously probably the most important people issue that companies are facing, and it should be, because it is really important, and there's not going to be a one-size-fits-all. So from my perspective, companies probably need to focus more at the board and CEO level and C level on this topic, and really spend a lot more time kind of working out what are the processes, the ways of working, and policies that work for their employees and their customers.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all?
It's not a one-size-fits-all. I would say that when you are starting a business or a department or onboarding a new employee, that face-to-face, that interaction, and what I call, building a relationship deeper than a work relationship is really important. Yeah. So, and this goes back to any interaction or engagement between people, but I think that's really important, and it's probably something that's been missed by a lot of organisations that have just taken the opportunity to adopt the remote working as a rule. And I learnt a long time ago, you've got to adapt what is out there as opposed to adopt. You've got to adapt it to what, in your situation, horses for courses. And I think a lot of companies are just taking this approach of, we'll just adopt what Slack is doing, or Atlassian or Google, right? As opposed to really working out what is required by them. And there may be many different models or ways of working that is required in an organisation. What may work for a Scrum team may be very different to what works for a management team. For an existing department versus a new department, you're going to have many different ways, and around flexible working to support your staff. And once again, the reason this is so important, because people are the most important thing in an organisation, even in a tech organisation or a tech department. They make the tech do what it does. So this is something that I think is front of mind, but not for as many organisations or senior people in organisations as it should be.